So, welcome everyone to our speaker series. And today I'm really glad to have Christie here to talk about mentorship with us. And I'm going to be passing off the cordial mic to her to introduce herself. And I look forward to everything that she's going to be talking about today and everything that she has to say about mentorship.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much. And thanks for joining me. My name is Christie Felker, as mentioned, and I'm a senior software developer at Shopify. Today, I'm going to be talking about the topic of mentorship. And it's an exciting one because it's had a really big impact on my journey and my career so far. And so it's fun to get a chance to share a little bit about that and why. And so to highlight that a little bit, I wanted to go through a bit more details about how I got to where I was today and why it's been such an impactful topic. My path to becoming a software developer isn't like the most typical path, or it wasn't simple. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do growing up. I remember everybody would ask me, and I don't know, I would say something like, animals are cool or something like that. Like I really wasn't sure. I knew that I was good at math, and I liked video games, and I liked the experiences I had with sort of building things or solving problems, but I wasn't really sure how to use any of that. I was encouraged by my teachers in high school to try a computer science class, and I did, but I was worried that it wasn't something that was really for me. I just didn't know where to take it. And so eventually I started university, and I did try to pursue computer science at first, but I was really challenged by the degree that I had and very intimidated, honestly. I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to. And again, sort of ended up feeling like it just was something that didn't fit me. And so eventually I switched into mathematics, and I stayed in software testing and sort of software related roles. But the big change for me, at least, started to happen in my co-op terms. And when I started to build a little bit of a network and people that I could talk to and ask questions to. And as I progressed through my career, that network grew, and my confidence, I think, grew with it as well. Until eventually I had a couple role changes and found myself in a role that I'm in now, and I really like it. And as I look back on that section of time, there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions that would come up, and they were things that, as they were answered, allowed me to really take another step. And those questions were things like, what would my day-to-day life in my career even be like? And how can I improve at this? And what does it mean to improve at this? At writing code, or at giving technical descriptions, or solving these problems? What kind of projects would be helpful for me to work on? Where do I find them? How do I start? What courses should I be taking? Are these the right courses? And what would interviews be like? All of these things, right, that sort of would come up, and I wouldn't know who to talk to and who to ask. And it wasn't until I found those people that I really was able to start feeling like I could make bigger strides towards things that would feel more fulfilling for me. And so in hindsight, those coworkers and then the managers on my co-op terms and my teachers in high school and my friends, they helped me shape and settle into a role that is really exciting. They taught me technical skills and encouraged me when I was nervous. They helped point out strengths that I didn't see before in myself and weaknesses. They gave feedback, and they would give me advice in difficult situations. So having mentors, whether they were official mentors, which eventually I did end up being assigned, like a co-op buddy at a work job, or unofficial mentors like teachers that I would go to when I had specific questions, or even just friends who are really good at things that I wanted to pursue, they made a huge difference. So today we're going to be talking a bit more in detail about how you can begin fostering these kinds of relationships intentionally. I started a lot of the time by just running into people, and I was lucky enough to run into people who really helped me along the way. But I think that this is something that you can start doing on purpose. And there's a way that you can do this on purpose that's valuable to you, but also really valuable to the people that are mentoring you. I'm now having the opportunity to mentor other individuals in similar situations to me, or who have questions about where they're going. And it's crazy how much value that brings to me as well. And so I think that there's a lot here that can be beneficial to everyone involved. And we'll also talk about some activities. So more specifically, these are the steps. We're going to be talking about deciding on goals and how you can convey those to the people that you want to continue forward with and learn from. We'll be talking about where do you find these people, and then how you set up for success in your future meetings with them. And finally, what you can do in those meetings to get the most value from those relationships. So first of all, something that I had tended to skip over or didn't really realize initially is that it can be really helpful to decide on a goal when you're approaching looking for a mentor. It happens naturally, of course, in relationship with people as you start going through life, but it can take a little while to learn how to do this as something that's just part of your skill set. So as I mentioned earlier, my university degree included a few co-op terms. Throughout each of these, I was actually assigned a mentor to work with me. So I didn't have to necessarily go out and seek one somewhere else. But I found it was really exciting to have all of these questions that I could finally ask to somebody. It was kind of where I started just walking up and asking, please tell me what to do. And I guess that was the issue at times. I was very eager to learn, and I wanted to do well, and I was really excited. But during our regular meetings, I would just sort of walk into the room and say something like, tell me what to do, or please tell me how to do well. And the thing is that the possibilities are somewhat endless around what skills you can focus on, or what's exciting to you, or what you can learn. And there's no one right decision for everyone. Although they can provide me with their opinions and they can talk to me about what they think could be good to look at and what helped them, they weren't able to tell me exactly what I should be doing. But if the mentors weren't there, or my onboarding buddies weren't there to help me decide, what to do, I wanted to think about what their dynamic with me really could be. And this is what I've sort of determined, at least so far, and that's from my own sort of perspective, but also through the Stemming Up program and other ways of learning about this a little bit more. But a mentor is a person who's there to guide you in many different developmental areas. They have a more ongoing relationship with you and a more holistic approach, instead of sort of just being like a manager or a project lead or somebody who is more senior than you in class. Those people could be helping, but it's nice to have somebody who's a little bit more stepped back from the typical day-to-day work and is safe to ask questions too. So they can share expertise and perspectives with you, provide encouragement and a safe environment to discuss fears or ideas. And notably, the situation can be more driven by the mentee instead of being prescribed to them like perhaps a manager might do. This is something where the mentee can come into the room and ask specific questions that feel the most important to them. This can mean helping develop certain technical skills or reviewing resumes or interview prep. But it could also be somebody that I just would meet with regularly and ask the silly questions that I was afraid to ask, even if they weren't silly. So now it's time to decide more on that goal. If this is a person who can have sort of a holistic approach to helping you and can provide guidance for you, then there's some things that you can consider when deciding on who that person might be or how you want to lay out those conversations. Keep in mind that this can and will likely change. The things that I needed as I was beginning to learn were different than the things later on. You don't need to have all of the answers, and it's okay if there are lots of things that seem like they would be helpful to you right now. You definitely don't just have to pick one type of mentor to help you. Things that you can consider when you're thinking about setting out on this journey is where do you want to be by the end of the year, or what about further in the future? What do you find exciting about your industry or education, but also what makes you nervous about it? What reassurances could help you, or what information would make this less of an intimidating journey? I know as I mentioned, when I was in that sort of early stages of picking the career when I was in university, there was just a lot of information that I didn't know what to do with, and having people to ask those questions to is what made it feel like I could move forward. You can also think about who inspires you and what qualities you find admirable. That can help you pick kind of skills or different areas that you might want to move towards. Some examples for me was learning how to improve my debugging skills. As I mentioned, when I was switching from my first couple of roles into the role that I'm in now, there was a lot of trying to learn how to interact with the technology differently, and it was something that didn't come naturally all the time. And so having people that I could practice with was something that I reached out to my coworkers for. And how to give helpful feedback to some of the interns or mentees was something that later on, like more recently, I've needed to ask mentors and friends to help me with. We would go into our general meetings and talk about how do you give feedback well, and how do you have more difficult conversations? It's something that is hard to learn on your own. Another example is how to navigate uncertainty in my career changes, or career direction rather, or how not to sell myself short in conversation, because sometimes I think it's really easy to sort of shy away from speaking confidently, and it's something that's still an ongoing lesson for me, but has been something I've asked mentors about. So those are different possible examples of what you might want to do, but it's different for everybody. And so taking some time to look at questions like this and write out lists of things that feel important to you can be a good way to start deciding on those goals. Our second step would be finding a mentor. Oh, I've noticed there's a chat conversation. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, we've got just the journey. For sure, learning doesn't have to be a lonely journey. And yes, mentors are safe to ask questions and offer great perspective. Absolutely. Yeah, and so once you've sort of decided on what might be helpful to bring a mentor into, the next step would be finding a mentor. And this can be both easier and more challenging than you might expect. It has been for me at different times. In some cases, you might realize that you actually have one or even many unofficial mentors already. When trying to identify who they might be, there's, again, more sort of questions you can ask yourself, such as, who do you typically reach out to when you have a question? Is there anyone you know who seems very good at bringing attention to your strengths and your weaknesses? And is there someone you look up to who has the skills you want to grow? And they kind of match a little bit almost with some of these goals we talked about before, because we're looking for the people who fill that role for you already in a way. These could be people that you work with, that you've met at events or in a class or program teachers. It doesn't have to be, and remember, it doesn't have to be somebody who's actually in the industry that perhaps you're looking at going into. There's a lot of different areas to learn about. I've ended up with having mentors that are talking more about public speaking, or as I mentioned before, like mentors talking about giving feedback and managing properly. When originally, I think I focused a lot more on having getting help from people who could teach me specific technical skills. So there's probably already people in your network that you can talk about and you have a good rapport with them. This can be a huge benefit, is it if they already know you and you already trust them. Building that up can be something that's difficult if it's somebody you're just meeting. It can be helpful to ask to formalize the mentorship situation with some of these people. But it's not necessary. If you find that you're already in a good situation where you can ask questions and go to them regularly, then just using some of these points we'll talk about going in the next couple sections to start conversations is also really helpful. But it's in most cases useful to bring forward these goals that we talked about in the first section. It can really help this individual or these individuals understand what you're looking for and set timelines or work with you to achieve those goals. The other thing is that I think it's helpful to start building these skills now and learn to start maintaining and developing the skills to work with a mentor, with the people who are already in your network. Even if it's not formalized as a regular meeting with a mentor and a mentee, as we'll talk about next. If you still feel like you might need to seek out a mentor and mentee to have a more formal, like regular meeting, or just to be able to ask more of these questions, there's other places you can look. Trying to attend events or community meetups can also be another great way to meet people who have the skill set you want to learn about. Conferences can be really great ways to meet people as well. And don't worry if you're going to a conference and you're still in the beginning stages of learning. I can say from my experience, most people are really excited to find people that are interested in the same thing as them and who have questions and are eager to learn and participate. There's also lots of online resources that can help you and programs specifically designed to help. As I mentioned, I'm a mentor right now for someone who I was assigned to meet with through the Stemming Up program. And we meet every 2 weeks or so and have been working through sort of the more formal mentor process towards goals that she has. So there's definitely lots of different ways that you can meet people and lots of different people who want to be involved in that process. Cool. So now that we've talked about deciding on goals that you might want to solve, or goals that you might want to accomplish with a mentor and where you might find them, it can be really helpful to take some time to make sure you discuss what you both expect from the dynamic. Making sure you're on the same page about time commitments and your desired outcome and is super important in maintaining trust and keeping the relationship a positive one. This can be a great time to bring up what we've talked about already in section 1, and knowing what's important to you will really help the mentor help you best. It's especially important if this is someone who wasn't originally in your network or doesn't know you super well. It can be really hard to start out if, again, sort of like I did in one of my earlier co-op terms, if you walk in and say, what do we do? Because they won't be able to identify that for you. So setting up for success can definitely mean sharing what's important up front. So something that's recently worked really well for me is having a first meeting that's kind of an introduction that focuses on setting up these expectations and guides. Taking notes here can help, so you can refer back once you need to, or if you need to down the line. And a few important things that I found was good to discuss was making sure to talk about the primary goal and focus, as I mentioned, and what the timeline for that might be. So perhaps you'd really like to have completed a specific project in a certain amount of time, or you want to set up to a presentation to talk to a group, or maybe you're hoping to get your first job, or and want to talk about like interview techniques. And so setting up what the goal is, what you're looking for, but also when you want to do that by can be a good sort of intro topic, as well as make sure to ask if there's any specific goal or timeline for your mentor as well. I can talk about this a bit more later, but I've found it really helpful to learn how to describe solutions to people who are just learning a new technology. And so that's a goal that I've had that didn't necessarily have a timeline, but telling my mentees about that can help them also bring things to me. And so it can be that mutually beneficial situation. You should also talk about how frequent meetings should be, what they should be like, and where they should take place. Mine are currently online, but they don't have to be. And you can talk about if you expect to just have sort of more casual conversations, or if you want to actually like build something together, or if you want to practice running interviews or anything like that. Be realistic about your timelines and how much time you can commit. I find it's better to be consistent and honest up front instead of overpromising and then regularly canceling. Life's busy, so go easy on yourself and make sure that what you're picking as far as your timeline is something that's not going to burn you out in the process. And feedback is my third point here, which is definitely like very important. Being able to share what's most helpful really helps you improve the quality of the meetings, and also help you learn about what kind of feedback is useful to you in general, which is something that you can tell like managers or even friends or other people that you're in communication with later on. And what kind of feedback's helpful for your mentor? What are they looking for, and what kind of things do they have questions about in the dynamic? Hearing honest feedback by someone who works with you and meets with you regularly can be extremely helpful. They can point out things that you might have missed about yourself. For example, it was one of my mentors, I think, who mentioned initially to me that I tend to downplay myself in conversation. And that's something that is natural to me, or had been natural to me, and was something that I really wanted to improve once they pointed it out. So setting up a safe way to check in about how things are going and what might be beneficial to either of you is really useful. And finally, now you're on to structuring and your sessions and your meetings. So it's time to get started, and you've considered all of the things that we've talked about. So there's only getting started is all that's left. What your mentorship sessions look like can be pretty unique. And I just wanted to bring sort of forward a couple tips that can help you be prepared to get to start with any of the topics that you're bringing forward. A few tips are prepare ahead of time and be ready to guide the conversation. As I mentioned earlier, the mentee really works best when the mentee is guiding the conversation, because the mentor won't know what's most interesting or helpful for you, and can't know what questions you might have about the topics you're working with. It's most useful if you are ready to bring some. You probably don't need a ton of them to have a really good conversation, but it can be tough to walk into a meeting and not have anything that you want to know more about. And stay engaged and actively listen when those conversations start, so that you can prompt any, or if their answer prompts any further questions, you're ready to continue. Don't just pretend to understand if you're not sure what's happening. I think it's tempting at times to want to seem like like everything made sense right away, but it's again another really good piece of feedback if an explanation didn't work for you. So make sure you're ready to follow up with anything that wasn't quite clear enough the first time. I've found it helpful to have a running note for myself where I jot things down if I'm thinking of a question between meetings. I tend to lose track of them, or maybe I'll forget them. And so it can be easy to just sort of put it somewhere and be able to pull on it whenever you're looking for a topic to discuss. And your meetings definitely don't have to focus on asking a technical question and waiting for an answer. Don't be afraid to ask about experiences or time management or any article that you've read about. You can bring a project or something to work on. And eventually you can also ask about your own strengths and weaknesses and see if there's something that you can grow into more. It's easier to start that or to continue on that kind of conversation once you've sort of built up a working relationship, but it can be really, really valuable eventually. Don't be afraid to ask those questions that you have, even if you've identified them as silly, which is something that I've done for myself before, but do be ready to explain what you've already tried. I think it can be tempting to sort of lean into these relationships so much that you haven't tried to find the answer yet, but it's not necessarily as helpful to ask a question when the answer is more simplistic and sort of just like, nope, do this. If you've already looked into things and you can sort of have that prepared, then you're ready to explain why what you found wasn't useful to you or didn't quite fit what you were looking for. So doing that prep work makes sure that the conversation is really useful to you and you're getting the most out of that time. And finally, try to stay positive and share wins. Topics can be tough in some of these conversations. It can be difficult to not understand something, or it can be about something that's difficult, like imposter syndrome, or being afraid of what the future might look like in your role or in the industry. But try to remain optimistic if you can. Mentors want to help you find a way to succeed and move forward and strategize. And that's probably, at least in part, why they're taking on the role. And so it can be difficult to continue helping if the mentee doesn't feel like a positive outcome is possible. So don't be afraid to talk about things that are difficult, but stay open to things moving in a positive direction. And sharing wins can be really exciting. It's always super fun for me if a mentee is sharing something that went really well or something that they learned. That's a great feeling and is really fun to be a part of. So don't be afraid to share when things go really well. And so those are the 4 steps. So once you've decided on your goals and found a mentor, you've done the planning that's required, and you sort of stepped into these meetings where you can talk about the questions you have and the projects and goals you want to achieve, you're ready to go. And I've found it to be a super valuable experience for me. And I hope that those steps can help you prepare as well. I know we have a few people on the call. And so if there is any questions, feel free to add that in the chat. I'm happy to answer, but I also brought a couple prepared frequently asked questions, just because I think they can be really sort of useful topics to explore. And one of those was, what do you wish you knew when you were beginning your career? For me, my first few years of tech were filled with, as I mentioned, a lot of uncertainty, and I found it a little bit intimidating. So I wish that I knew at that point that the journey doesn't have to be the same as everybody else. I definitely had a little bit of switching between things until I felt like I was really settled. But there were lots of people who wanted me to succeed and were happy to answer questions. And so once I was brave enough to sort of work within my network and talk to people about those things, it made it a lot easier for me. And I also wish that I knew that the learning never really stops. I think I had this image that I would just be able to sort of learn the thing and then I would be good, but you don't really ever just arrive And that's a good thing. I think it's exciting that there's kind of always the next thing, and sort of always somebody else who's been pushing towards learning that thing as well. You're not alone in the learning, and there can be other people to collaborate with. Another question that I added was, why did I choose to be a mentor for Stemming Up, and has anything surprised me about the experience? Originally, I chose to be part of the mentorship program, I think in part because I wanted to practice giving feedback and explaining concepts, and also that I remembered feeling really confused before, and I was hoping that I could help other people in the same situation as me. But what was surprising to me was that being a mentor really has helped me become a better mentee as well. Getting to see it from the other perspective has helped me figure out what kind of questions really work for me, and what sort of discussions felt the most valuable for both sides. And I also learned a lot about where my strengths in communication and weaknesses might be. It was interesting to see sort of the responses to explaining something, and also positively to see those responses. I think it helped with some imposter syndrome around if I really understood what I was talking about. It was a good feeling to learn that I could explain something to someone else and have them start to pick up the concept as well. And the last question that I wanted to ask and answer was, can you give me an example, or can I give an example of one good discussion topic for a mentorship meeting? And I thought of this because there's a specific kind of question that I find myself asking a lot, and that when my mentee asks me is also really useful. Usually it's something that follows the pattern: I learned about this small concept, I generally understand it, but I don't really see how it fits into the bigger picture. When I'm asking something like this, I almost feel like I have a puzzle piece of a concept figured out, and I'm trying to figure out where I should put it within the knowledge that I have so far. This might be something you've learned in class, or you're asking, how is this actually used professionally or in the rest of the world, or something like that. And learning the broad context of how things work together is something that takes time and experience, which is generally what a mentor is really good at helping with, and sort of providing that like but the expertise that you don't yet have. And so I think like searching for the context or the information around a puzzle piece can be really, a puzzle piece of a concept can be really, really helpful. So yeah, if there's any other questions in the group, I'd be happy to answer those as well. But
yeah, off, I just wanted to say, oh yeah, sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to say that thank you for everything that you've mentioned here, and it's been just really insightful to hear about your experiences. I'd say some of your, struggles, but then also how you've really just learned from them, and that's really inspiring just overall. So thank you for that. I just wanted to pass off like the mic to, sorry if I mispronounce your name, Manel, just to give them some time to either like ask a question or to just chat with you as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so feel free to, I'd say, unmute yourself or just ask a question through the chat box as well. So that way we can, I'd say, exchange ideas, and I can also mute myself as well to just give you some time to speak.
Okay, hi guys.
Hi.
I didn't really, well, like I have mentors that I was kind of assigned to through like a program like in May, but I've never contacted them afterwards. And to be honest, I didn't really know how to, so I was kind of just struggling with that.
Yeah, it can be tough. It can be tough to know how to reach out and sort of ask for a next step or ask for help, or even really how to build that relationship. I think what can be, or what has been useful for me before, is really identifying for me what it was I was looking for. I think like it's something that I kind of came back to a couple times, but trying to figure out what the end goal is or what you feel like is missing from your skill set, can be a very good opener for reaching out to a mentor. And instead of sort of saying, hey, can we talk more about stuff, you can say, hey, I'm really interested in this concept and I think you might be able to help me. Do you have time or capacity to meet regularly or talk about it once? I think like guiding with that sort of goal in mind can be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, like when you say concept, is it like concept we learn in classes and type of courses, and then I ask them help that way?
It can be, definitely. I think it's I think it can be based on sort of where you want to go, and that can be like simply that you want to do well in your classes, or that can be that you want to learn about this specific technology. Anything you've identified as a end goal for you, it can be about any of that. So there's definitely no strict rules around like what kinds of things that you can learn with a mentor. I think as long as you've found people who are sort of in the same space or have the skills, then you should go for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much.
Also, are your slides going to be available, or is it something you can share?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure, but I can talk to the organizers and see if we're going to share slides. I know there's also a recording of the presentation that's happening as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Christy. I also wanted to ask, since you've said that you've had a few mentors in your past time, I'd say like, what's a piece of advice or different pieces of advice that they've given you that you still stick with to today and you keep in mind when you're in a tough situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think definitely like a lot of the like technical knowledge that I've learned from mentors has been really, really helpful. I like when I'm working on a problem at work, like I still think back to like previous conversations from eras ago of learnings from them. I think a conversation that comes to mind is definitely that idea of just how my language can accidentally undersell the value I'm bringing to the team. I think I have in my history had a tendency to sort of soften what I'm bringing up and say, I think maybe perhaps I'm doing this thing. Could somebody look at it if they have time? Instead of saying, this is what I've discovered and this is what I'm hoping to achieve, or this is what I've discovered and I'm concerned about this. And so I think having a mentor notice that I was doing that and then bringing it to me as a piece of feedback was really, really useful.
Yeah, for sure. I think you also mentioned that it's really great that mentors also just provide you a new perspective. And I think that's also really helpful as well, just because I feel like we're really accustomed to see like one way of things and see ourselves in a certain light. So having someone else who's maybe not your family, not your friends, give you that advice back is really helpful, and they help you just see a new reflection of yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other, now that I'm thinking about it, the other sort of recent piece of advice, where I guess in the past couple of years, there's been, I constantly have come up against this moment of like, I thought I'd learned the thing and now there's all of these new things to learn. And I think like I can end up struggling with imposter syndrome, or I think a lot of us can, and sort of having people who are a couple years down the line in a similar role say that that's very normal. It's normal to look back at the work you were doing and realize that you've come a long way, but also look forward and realize that you have a long way to go. Feeling that way is very normal, and it is an experience that you perhaps get more comfortable with, but is generally something that will happen. And so I guess that shared camaraderie in the feeling of realizing that there's still so much more learning to do, and also that can be like a really good and fun thing to do when you're doing it as part of a community. Yeah.
I think that's also a really interesting perspective because I feel like even as a student, I feel like after school, okay, like I'm done learning all the hard stuff, and then now I'll just go into the industry or I'll go into whatever I want, and then like I'll start learning again if I need to, but it's really just a whole journey and it's hard to navigate. But I think that, as you mentioned, if we have a mentor there, it might be easier for us to, not to make some mistakes and to be more aware of some things. So I think you like bring up a really excellent point because it is like really easy to fall into the deception of like, okay, I'm done for now, but it's never done. So it's important to know.
Yeah, and that's good. It would be boring if it was done.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think
Yeah.
I've even fallen into that like misconception, but it's important to just, pull yourself out from that and just, stay hungry for knowledge and stay hungry for like just new learning. So that's really important. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I was just wondering, as you mentioned that like your mentors have like given you a lot of just different knowledge and perspectives, like as you went through your co-ops, like you got to know them better. I was just wondering also if they were the ones to also just, I say like recommend you towards certain roles or recommend you to like play towards your strengths and like lead you to the role you're in today. Is that
Yeah,
something?
definitely. I think I've been really fortunate in the people in my network and helping sort of guide me along the journey so far. It was, I think, originally a teacher who was really a great teacher, honestly, who identified that perhaps I was feeling nervous about trying to pursue the role or career in technology and encouraged me to take that jump anyways. And I think, again, a manager a couple of years into my career was the one to come to me and say, do you want to try this other role? Like, you're good at what you do, but this seems like something you'd also be really good at and you might find exciting. And those kinds of things have really helped me be know that the opportunity existed, but also feel confident and emboldened to take the jump into something new. Having other people identify or help you identify those things can be a really good sort of catalyst towards making a decision or a jump towards that. So definitely, it's been huge.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I think also it's just great to have people who, are just willing to give you a chance. And I think like as I look back on that as well, like having those experiences and opportunities, it's really nice. And I'm glad for those people as well who have, just helped you out and just been there for you. So yeah, honestly, great message. And I really resonate with that. Yeah, that's great. And again, your experiences are all like really interesting. And I was just wondering also, was there a specific maybe moment in mentorship or as a mentee that you found, you said you had like you felt like, oh, either I feel like this has been a really great relationship or like this moment is like really why I found like mentorship so great and so like awesome. Like there can be definitely more than one in your lifetime, but is there one that just stands out recently or?
Um, yeah, I think let me think of a good example. I think I'll actually sort of answer from the other perspective. Since I've been recently having more of a chance to formally mentor someone through the Stemming Up program, I think like that's been a really cool experience to see like the different changes in her or like the different knowledge that she's sort of gaining or the kinds of questions she's asked start to develop throughout the course of the mentorship. That's been a really, really cool experience. But from my side of things, I think what's been really helpful recently is as I've been developing, I've only recently been promoted into the senior role, and that anytime there's a role change, I find that there's like a section of sort of nerves that come with that. And I think I've had someone who specifically has been just like a really good source of encouragement as I've been going through that, and just saying like, this is something that fits you, like, and being able to even like point out examples that I may have missed, or ways that I like filled the role well even before I before I moved into that role. I think like my manager has been really, really great about that, or even other peers on my team. So I think, I mean, I speak a lot about like that imposter syndrome, and I think having mentors who can help alongside those kinds of moments are really, really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I think that imposter syndrome, I think it's almost, it's like ubiquitous. I never really met anyone who's never had it before. So you mentioned like really great points in having someone to be there for you and you know, pull you out of those like moments of doubt. So really awesome. And again, just thank you so much for all the advice that you've given. And I think that you've just continued to like just share really awesome moments through this like Q&A. I'm just going to stop the recording for now and we can chat off the recording. And yeah,
Sure.
just really appreciate this.
Thank you.